I think the biggest problem now is that this generation has normalized so much, incompetence with dating and kind of self analyzing that we've kind of hurt ourselves in the sense. I feel like a lot of people are hard at accurately assessing themselves because they have so much pride for themselves, and it's good to have pride to a certain point, but I feel like sometimes it could be damaging. Sometimes this pride can honestly change us and not really give us a clear view of other people. I feel like we have to start appreciating that. So many things have been normalized and I feel like okay with this generation that people kind of fail to see it. If we stopped having such, ego, we'd be able to see a lot of things that we're actually missing, and not only with other people, but within ourselves. I feel like this kind of ego is something we have to change. It's something we have to experience in order to feel better, but also in order to kind of become a new person. You kind of have to reinvent yourself. And that comes with creating yourself. It comes necessarily. Ego death is important. This is the thing that you need to have in order to be vulnerable and actually see yourself. I feel like a lot of times people have this idea, that they have so much pride and they have so much ego that they don't have to do certain things or treat people a certain way. We have to realize as soon as you experience this ego death, you're able to see things without any bias to it. Now you're able to be more open to other people's perceptions because you don't have a clear perception of yourself yet. When you allow yourself to be more knowledgeable, to grow and to take things for as they are instead of assuming, or instead of having this natural bias towards yourself, you start to see the beauty in these things. You're able to appreciate these things so much more because there is nothing controlling it. There is no incentive or thing we're looking to get out of it, but rather we're just learning as we go. And as soon as we start to experience life like this is what it means to change. As soon as we're trying to be better, and we're trying to learn more, not only about ourselves but about other people, we're inviting love and genuine things to come into our life. If you're restricting yourself from these things and feeling like your ego and pride is holding you back, then that's the problem with it. That's holding you and changing you. I feel like when we're experiencing ego death, you're able to see life more clearly. I feel like it kind of breaks these pride glasses that we put on, every single day. This ego that we have to say, oh, I'm better than this person, or I can judge this person because of anything. And I feel like we became very judgmental in the sense, even your past. I feel like people have this idea that your past is now this random token that follows you around everywhere. And I feel like past definitely can be effective and it can hurt people and it can change, but I do feel like it's not something we should use to measure people. And I feel like that measurement is so unfair. What you did in your past and now this reason, it's not something that defines you. It's not something that you can honestly move forward with. Why would you keep this idea in the back of your mind the whole time? You have to be able to kind of correlate and get past it. Your past isn't something that you should be focusing on. You're struggling so much to be present in the present and to appreciate the future that you're focusing so much more on the past. You're not able to really value and see anything for as it is because you keep dwelling on the past mistakes you've made. Even if you are looking for the future, a lot of times we have a lot of anxiety and kind of problems with it. And when we look in the past, we're feeling sad, and we're feeling ruined because we have to realize that ultimately time passes, and we have to appreciate that time as it comes to us. And I feel like too many times, we're trying so hard to kind of focus on something else or focus on this past mistake we've made that it's kind of makes us incapable of smelling the roses. This time moving forward is something that's holding us back. You have to have this kind of change, and invoking that change comes with a lot of, perseverance and challenge, but I feel like that change is the most, necessary thing needed to experience. If you're not experiencing any change, then why would you, try to do anything new at all? And I feel like when we are on the topic of, your pride and your ego, you have to realize that that ego can withhold you from that change. You might think you're better than or you accurately assess other people, but really it's wrong. I feel like it's very shallow to look into other people's lives and to automatically assume these things when people can do that to you, and they might be completely wrong, looking at you or having one conversation or one relationship with you. I feel like isn't enough to accurately know someone. And I feel like when we're doing that, when we're kind of mitigating someone down to this small perception or the small idea of a person we have of them, it honestly disrespects their own idea. We have to be more aware and stop being so judgmental. I feel like if we were less judgmental, it'd be so much easier to communicate because then people wouldn't have a problem with saying certain things. That's what I don't get. you have to stop being so judgmental. You have to realize that subconsciously you're always going to judge people. And when you're using this judge, and forming these biases against people when you don't actively know them, I feel like it's so unfair. Using someone's past shouldn't be a measurement to how much they're worth now. You have to realize that when you're talking to people, you have to take them for as they are. Their past or whatever mistakes they've made is honestly entirely up to them. The things that they have experienced now shape them to the person they are today. If you're focusing so much more on someone's past than their future, you have to realize that now it's kind of going backwards. It's contradictory because you're not trying to look forward. And when we are judging people so easily, we have to realize that people can judge us that same way. When we're being judged with this idea, not a lot of people will actively know what you've experienced, and what you went through and those things that have led you, to make certain decisions. And if people only looked at you for those certain decisions and defined you as that, it'd be unfair. If we wanted to give people more honesty and more of a clean slate, we'd stop doing that. We'd kind of appreciate what people have gone through, but also see them for who they are now. And I feel like if we want to see people, we'd be more confident, more confident in seeing who they are as a person. And I feel like a lot of times pride can kind of take you away from seeing people because you feel like you're so much better, or you feel like there's something they're doing that's so against you, but you have no idea, you have no reason to know what's actually going on with them. And it's struggling. And I feel like there's a lot of struggle that comes with trying to find your own identity. And I feel like that identity that you're thinking of is something that you have to honestly create. When you think about the perfect version of you, the version of you that you're dreaming for, it's something you have to tend to daily. This is something that you have to add to. If you have this version, why not be that person now? You have to kind of do a change. You have to create yourself. It's less about finding yourself. And I feel like when you are adding more things onto you, and trying new things and kind of getting out of your comfort zone, you're able to actively grow, and if we're able to grow, that kind of opens up our own perceptions. If you're closed-minded or very, cognizant of the things that are going on around you, how are you going to actually grow or change as a person? And I feel like that change is something that so many people are scared of, but they don't actively want to do. No one wants to do that change. And that change causes a lot. That change can be harmful, or this change might seem like a lot, but it's going to hurt. It hurts staying there, but it also hurts moving on. And I feel like the moving on hurt is something that we have to go with. You have to be more comfortable with that because at least at the end of it, there's light at the end of that tunnel, And I feel like when we are staying the same and we are staying, to those things that we feel are for us, we're being disingenuous to ourselves. Your pride is like holding you back in a sense. We have to kind of lower it, and same with your ego. I feel like if you lower these things, if you try to like honestly have them and form your own ideas about these things instead of just absorbing everyone's perception or whatever you've seen on social media, your own definitions, these are things that have to be defined by your experience. Your experience is the thing that's the most important here. You don't have to be validated by anyone. You don't have to have anyone kind of add on to it or okay what you already think. This is something that you think for yourself now. And I feel like if we started to lead more into that and kind of trust our own gut, trust our own, intuition with these things, it'd be a lot easier to process them. Processing your emotions is going to be a lot harder now. There's a reason you feel that way, and your experience definitely says so. And I feel like if we're withholding that, we're hurting ourselves. Your experience shapes your definitions, and you have to realize that you can't absorb everyone else's perceptions or ideas with these things, just because you've seen so many rules presented by other people or what other people say, you should be doing with your life or you should be doing with your relationship. Honestly, it's something that you have to find on your own. I feel like if we do want to help other people, we have to realize that sometimes it doesn't mean taking on other people's responsibilities, but rather offering that love and support from afar and seeing if they're able to kind of appreciate it and move forward within themselves. That change can only be invoked by the person who needs the change, and if we're trying to get people to change, we're trying to get people to appreciate something or to do something new with their life, so much so we're hurting them. You have to realize that you can now hurt this person because you're taking over their responsibilities. You're taking over the things in their their life that they have to correct, they have to move on from. Now you're giving this person that idea that they can only do this, growth with someone else. They can only experience this change relying on someone else to do it for them. You have to let this person learn. You have to let people grow by themselves. And that growth by yourself is something that I feel like people are shying away from. And I feel like when we are shying away from that, and we're letting our mind kind of do the talking in that sense, and you're like, oh well, I don't think I can do that, or I'm not sure if I can do that, that negative mindset gets you nowhere. You have to realize that you have infinite chances to change. There's no limit on that. You have to realize that when you're actively thinking about life, like when you're thinking about it right now, you are able to change and to do anything you want in your head. You are able to. You are capable. You can learn. You can grow. And that process is something that I feel like we don't appreciate enough. You're able to have this growth. You're able to have this change. And we have to be more confident in that. Your pride is something that I feel like is something that you should definitely have, when you are confident in yourself, when you do, experience these hardships and are able to persevere. But I feel like in a sense now that you should lower that ego, and you should experience life. Stop holding yourself back because you feel, this displacement with things. It takes more time to learn, but it also, reminds us that we have to grow, and it takes time to do all these things. And it's so much easier said than done. But when we do them, we're going to be able to appreciate life for what it is, and that life is something that we honestly need to experience, instead of just going and letting the days pass and feeling like, oh well, this happened to me, a while back, and I'm okay, like I'm just gonna move forward and act like it never happened. No, you have to act like it happened. Now you can break that cycle. Now you can change. Acting like it never happened isn't gonna do anything for you. And I think that's the problem that so many people have. Acting like that thing never happened isn't gonna help you grow. You have to actually realize that that thing happened, and the role that you took, and everything that went into it actually happened to you. You have to be able to grow in that sense. If you're telling yourself, I'm going to move forward like this thing never happened, then how are you going to move forward at all? You have to experience and have that change. You have to appreciate it for what it is, And I feel like when we let ourselves, change and let ourselves and open up ourselves to have this experience, we're now able to grow. Appreciate yourself, and have the pride to be confident within yourself, but also be able to grow. That's what we need in this life. That's what we need in order to be comfortable and confident enough to change. And I think that change is what we've been missing for so long. Be confident in yourself, and have this idea that you are not above anyone, but capable. And capable to keep growing and growing and growing time and time again. That's what we have to have.